Welcome, nighttime traveler, to Sleepy Bedtime Stories, your haven of stories and tales to help you sleep. This is the place where traditional tales come to life and accompany you on your journey to rest. But first, tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. I'd love to know if you're joining me from your bed, from a cozy sofa, or perhaps from some corner of the world where you can still feel the spirit of ancient tales. Please leave me a comment. Every message from you is like a fragment of a precious amphora. If you'd like to support this space of peace and relaxation, subscribe and share the channel so that more people can find their refuge here. And now, take a slow, deep breath, because tonight we're going to dive into another thrilling story.
The Stone City That Never Fully Awoke. Chapter 1. Stone Streets at Nightfall. Night falls upon the city like a cloak of dark velvet, unfolding slowly from the horizon until it covers every rooftop, every alleyway, every silent square. It is at that very moment, when the last ray of sunlight disappears behind the distant mountains, that the city of stone begins its ancient ritual of falling asleep. It is not a sleep like that of other cities, where the lights go out and silence descends abruptly. Here, in this place that time seems to have forgotten, sleep arrives like a slow tide, creeping through the cobbled streets with the patience of the centuries. The first oil lamps are lit in the windows, tiny golden stars that twinkle faintly against the gathering darkness. The city's inhabitants walk with deliberate steps, almost ceremonious, towards their homes. There is no haste in their movements, no urgency. Every gesture seems measured, calculated, as if part of a dance choreographed generations ago. Their faces, carved by the day's sun and now bathed in the silvery light of the rising moon, express a calm that borders on the supernatural. The city stretches across a hill that rises from the earth like the hump of a sleeping giant. Its buildings, built entirely of grey stone quarried from nearby quarries, are piled one upon another in a chaotic harmony that defies architectural logic. The streets wind between the buildings like petrified rivers, rising and falling along slopes that have worn down the shoes of countless generations. No two houses are alike, and yet they all share that same quality of permanence, that sense of having been there forever and of continuing to stand long after the last of their inhabitants has departed. In the central square, the ancient well yawns towards the night sky. Its rim, polished by millions of hands over the centuries, glows faintly in the moonlight. The water within, say the elders, comes from a spring that rises in the very heart of the mountain, a place where the earth's veins still beat with the memory of the world before man. By the well, an old man pauses, resting his gnarled hands on the cold stone. His breathing is slow, deep, in sync with the city's invisible pulse. He fills a bucket with movements that have lost all urgency, that have become pure ritual, and the sound of the water falling is like a whisper rising towards the stars. The wind blows gently from the north, carrying with it the scent of the lavender-covered hills surrounding the city. It is a wind that has traveled hundreds of kilometers, that has caressed ancient forests and crossed valleys where flocks still graze under the watchful eye of solitary shepherds. When it reaches the cobbled streets, the wind becomes a murmur, a wordless voice that seeps through every crack, through every crevice, whispering secrets that only the city can understand. The inhabitants hear it without really hurry, knowing it, feeling its presence as one feels the beating of one's own heart. Something so familiar that it has ceased to be conscious. In one of the oldest houses, whose facade bears the scars of centuries of rain and sun, a woman prepares dinner over a wood-burning stove. The flames dance languidly, casting elongated shadows upon the bare stone walls. The smoke rises in lazy spirals towards the ceiling, escaping through a hole that serves as a chimney. There is no conversation, no radio or television. Only the crackling of the fire and the occasional scrape of the wooden spoon against the bottom of the iron pot. The woman works with mechanical movements, yet not without grace. Her eyes, though fixed on the food she is preparing, seem focused on something much further away, something that exists beyond the walls of her home, beyond even the city limits. The church bells begin to ring, marking 8 o'clock in the evening. It is not a cheerful or urgent toll, but a slow, almost melancholic chime that spreads over the city like concentric waves. Each chime seems to last an eternity, resonating in the chests of those who hear them, vibrating in the very stones of the buildings. The church stands at the highest point of the city, a austere structure of dark stone whose tower rises like a finger pointing towards the sky. It was built, according to the fragmentary records that still survive, in the year 1236, though there are those who claim that its foundations are much older, resting upon the remains of a pagan temple dedicated to gods whose names have been lost in the mists of time. As the bells continue their rhythmic lament, more and more windows darken. Families retire to their bedrooms, where mattresses stuffed with sheep's wool await them beneath hand-woven blankets. Parents lie down beside their children, grandmothers beside their grandchildren. And in that closeness, there is a warmth that transcends the physical. It is as though, by sleeping together, they share not only the warmth of their bodies, but also their dreams, weaving an invisible web that unites the whole city into a single sleeping organism. But the city never sleeps completely. There is always something, some element that remains awake, keeping watch. In the bakery, the oven still retains the heat of the day, its embers glowing with an orange radiance that filters through the cracks in its iron door. The baker will rise in a few hours, long before dawn, to begin kneading the bread that will feed the city the following day. Now he rests, but his sleep is not deep. It is a light sleep, watchful, like that of an animal sleeping with one eye open. On the outskirts of the city, where the last houses meet the cultivated fields, dogs occasionally bark at the shadows moving among the olive trees. They are muffled barks, lacking conviction, as if the animals themselves knew there is no real dang here, that they are merely fulfilling an ancestral duty of vigilance. The olive trees, twisted and gnarled, some with trunks so wide that it would take 3 men to encircle them with their arms, sway gently in the night breeze. These trees have seen generations come and go. They have borne fruit to feed the great-great-grandparents of the great-grandparents, and will continue to do so for generations yet to be born. The moon, now in its fullness, rises majestically above the city, bathing it in its silvery light. Beneath its glow, the cobblestones seem to shine with a light of their own, as if they held within them fragments of all the moons that have illuminated them over the centuries. The shadows lengthen and shorten capriciously, creating a landscape of contrasts where every nook seems to hide a secret. Every corner promises a mystery. In one of the watchtowers that still stand from medieval times, when the city needed to defend itself against invaders whom no one remembers anymore, an owl has made its nest. Its hooting pierces the silence at regular intervals, a sound that might seem unsettling, but which, for the city's inhabitants, is as familiar as the sound of their own breathing. The owl gazes with its large yellow eyes into the darkness, hunting mice that dare to emerge from their burrows in search of food. It is the perfect nocturnal hunter, and its presence adds another thread to the complex tapestry of life that never ceases entirely in the stone sit. Why, the stars begin to reveal themselves one by one in the sky, as if waking from a slumber of their own. First the brightest, those that form the constellations which generations of inhabitants have used to find their way, to predict the seasons, to tell stories to children before they sleep. Then the faintest ones, those that can only be seen when the eyes have fully adjusted to the darkness, when the last artificial light has been switched off and the sky becomes an infinite canvas of luminous possibilities. The river that runs along the western edge of the city continues its eternal flow, oblivious to the dreams of men. It is a small river, no wider than a child's stride at its narrowest points, but deep in its history. Its waters have reflected the faces of Roman conquerors, of Arab traders, and medieval pilgrims. It has seen armies cross its fords in times of war, and has refreshed weary peasants in times of peace. The sound of its current, a constant, soothing murmur, is like a lullaby that nature sings to the city. Along its banks, weeping willows bend their branches until they touch the water, creating green curtains that sway with every movement of the air. Beneath these trees, on small stone benches carved generations ago, elderly couples used to sit during the day, watching the water flow by, reminiscing about times gone by. Now, at night, these places are empty, yet they seem to retain the imprint of those bodies, as if the stone held the thermal memory of all who have rested upon them. In the cemetery that stretches along the northern slope of the hill, the stone gravestones stand in irregular rows. Some are so weathered by time that the inscriptions have become illegible, names and dates erased by centuries of rain and wind. Others are more recent, with letters still clear, proclaiming names that are still remembered by the living. The townspeople do not fear this place. For them, the dead are not truly absent, but inhabit a parallel realm, one that overlaps with that of the living at certain moments, particularly in those liminal hours between sleep and wakefulness. A stray cat, with grey fur that blends in perfectly with the city's cobblestones, walks stealthily along one of the narrow streets. Its green eyes shine in the dark like tiny emeralds. It stops in front of a closed door, sniffing the air, and then continues its nightly rounds. It is one of the many cats that inhabit the city, descendants of generations of felines that have lived in symbiosis with humans, hunting mice and receiving in return scraps of food and, occasionally, a distracted stroke. In the blacksmith's house, the anvil lies in silence, cold now after a day's work under the tireless hammer. The tools hang on hooks on the walls, arranged in an order that speaks of years of practice, of knowledge passed down from master to apprentice through the generations. the blacksmith sleeps in the adjoining room is less than number. One hash is greater than his calloused hands resting on his chest, his breathing deep and steady. Tomorrow, at the first light of dawn, the anvil will sing its metallic song once more. But now it is silent, waiting. The public fountains, strategically scattered throughout the city, continue to flow with a constant trickle. The water falls into worn stone basins, creating a sound that is like the heartbeat of the city itself. These fountains have quenched the thirst of countless generations, have been the meeting place where news and rumors were exchanged, where friendships were formed and marriages arranged. The water flowing through them comes from the very same aqueduct system built by engineers over 6 centuries ago, an engineering marvel that continues to function with the same efficiency as on the day of its inauguration. In a window on the 2nd floor of a narrow house, a candle still burns. Behind the misted glass, the silhouette of a young woman can be glimpsed, writing in a notebook with yellowed pages. She is the school teacher, preparing her lessons for the following day. Her handwriting is neat and careful, each letter formed with the precision of one who understands the weight of words. She writes about the history of the city, about the legends told on winter nights by the fire, about the names of the plants that grow on the surrounding hills. She writes to preserve, to ensure that knowledge is not lost, that the next generation knows where they come from, and who they are. Time in the stone city seems to move differently than in other places. It is not that it stops completely, but rather that it thickens. It becomes dense as honey, flowing with a slowness that allows one to savor every moment. The hours of the night stretch out like long, dark fingers, touching every corner, caressing every surface. There are no digital clocks here, no bright screens to pierce the darkness with their artificial light. Time is measured by the movement of the stars, by the crowing of the cock that will herald the dawn, by the depth of the silence that indicates how far into the night we have gone. In the village tavern, now closed and dark, the wooden tables still retain the scent of wine spilled during the day. It is a sweet, slightly tart smell, mingled with that of freshly baked bread and mature cheese. During the hours of daylight, this place buzzes with life, with conversations overlapping one another, with laughter echoing off the stone walls. But now, in the silence of the night, it resembles an empty stage waiting for the actors to return to continue the play they have been performing for centuries. A bat crosses the sky in erratic flight, hunting insects invisible in the darkness. Its silhouette is silhouetted against the moon for a moment before disappearing once more into the shadows. It is another of the city's nocturnal inhabitants, a creature that has made its home in the dark recesses of abandoned towers and attics. The human inhabitants tolerate it, even appreciate it, knowing that its presence helps control the mosquito population that would otherwise make summer nights unbearable. The temperature drops gradually, as it usually does on nights in this region. The heat accumulated during the day in the stones begins to dissipate, and a pleasant coolness settles over the city. It is a chill that does not bite but caresses, inviting one to curl up under the blankets, to seek the warmth of another sleeping body nearby. In the houses, the fireplaces, which still hold embers, provide a gentle but constant warmth, enough to keep the cold at bay without being excessive. The city's rooftops, mostly covered with fired clay tiles that have taken on a reddish, almost brown hue over time, form an undulating landscape when viewed from above. Each roof has a slightly different pitch, a unique orientation, the result of centuries of building and rebuilding, of repairs and extensions. Some have small towers or chimneys that rise like fingers pointing to the sky. Others are flat, with terraces where, in summer, families sleep outdoors to escape the stifling heat inside. On one of these rooftops, a pair of pigeons has made its nest in a corner sheltered from the wind. They sleep huddled together, their heads tucked under their wings, completely motionless. Only the occasional movement of their bodies as they breathe indicates that they are alive. When dawn breaks, their cooing will be one of the first sounds to break the silence of the night. But now they are utterly silent. The cobbled streets, polished by millions of footsteps over the centuries, glisten in the moonlight as if they were wet. In some places, where the stones have sunk slightly under the weight of time, small puddles form when it rains, tiny mirrors reflecting the sky. But tonight it hasn't rained, and the city is dry, each stone distinct from the others in shape and size, fitting together in an irregular mosaic that could only have been created by human hands working patiently over generations. In the carpenter's workshop, the scent of fresh wood and varnish fills the air. Wood shavings pile up in neat little heaps on the floor, waiting to be collected tomorrow. The tools hang on the wall, each in its designated place. Saws with sharp teeth that catch the moonlight filtering through the window. A half-finished table waits in the center of the workshop, its legs still unpolished, its surface unsanded. The carpenter sleeps upstairs, dreaming perhaps of the grain pattern in the wood he will work on tomorrow, of the shape that will emerge from the raw timber beneath his expert hands. The wind changes direction, now bringing different scents. The scent of the pines growing in the mountains to the east arrives, mingled with the earthy smell of the recently ploughed fields. It is a scent that speaks of eternal cycles, of sowing and harvesting, of death and rebirth. The city's inhabitants, even in their sleep, perceive these subtle changes in the air, their bodies unconsciously adapting to the variations in temperature and humidity. At school, the wooden desks stand in neat rows, each marked with the initials and scribbles of generations of pupils. The blackboard at the front of the classroom still bears the faint remnants of the previous day's lesson, mathematical equations that have become ghostly beneath a thin layer of chalk dust. The books rest on their shelves, their worn spines displaying titles in gold lettering that has faded with time. They are books that have been read and reread, that have passed from hand to hand, that contain not only the words printed on their pages, but also the invisible traces of all who have touched them. The market square, so bustling during the day with vendors hawking their wares and shoppers haggling over prices, is now completely deserted. The stalls have been packed away, the fruit and vegetables stored away, the awnings rolled up. Only the marks on the ground remain, the stains and wear that indicate where each vendor has set up their stall for years, perhaps decades. Tomorrow, when the sun rises on the horizon, the square will once again be filled with life. But now it is an empty space that seems to hold within its silence the echo of all the commercial exchanges that have taken place there. An old dog sleeps curled up against the door of his master's house, his grey coat moving gently with every breath. He has been this family's faithful companion for over 12 years, and now, in his old age, he prefers to sleep outside, as if he wanted to be between two worlds, that of humans inside the house and that of the wild outdoors beyond the city walls. His paws move occasionally, as if he were running in his dreams, chasing rabbits. He no longer has the energy to hunt in real life. The stars continue their slow rotation around the world's axis, a cosmic dance that has continued uninterrupted since long before the city existed, and will continue long after its last stones have turned to dust. The city's inhabitants know these constellations as well as they know the lines on their own hands. They use them to navigate on moonless nights, to predict when the next harvest will come, to tell stories that connect the sky with the earth. In the doctor's house, glass jars filled with herbs and tinctures line the shelves that cover the walls of his surgery. Each jar is labeled in meticulous handwriting, indicating its contents and medicinal uses. There is chamomile to soothe the stomach, valerian to aid sleep, arnica for bruises, comfrey for broken bones. It is knowledge the doctor inherited from his father, who inherited it from his own, an unbroken chain of healers stretching back to time immemorial. Now the doctor sleeps, but if someone were to knock at his door with an emergency, he would rise immediately, fully alert, ready to practice his art. The night grows even deeper, reaching that point where even those most resistant to sleep finally succumb. The last lit windows go dark. The city enters a state most akin to true sleep, though it never quite crosses that threshold. Is greater than, there is always something awake, something watchful. The river continues its murmur. The wind keeps blowing. The stars keep shining. Life, in its most subtle forms, persists. In the very heart of the city, in a small square that few visitors ever discover, there is an ancient fountain whose design suggests a Roman origin. Water flows from the mouth of a stone lion, falling into a circular basin where the moon's reflections create shifting patterns. Is greater than this fountain, according to local tradition, has never run dry, not even during the most severe droughts that have struck the region. The elders say that the water from this fountain has special properties, that it can cure certain illnesses, that it can grant wishes if drunk at the stroke of midnight. But these are merely whispers, legends passed down from generation to generation, with no one able to confirm their truth. The stones of the buildings, now completely cooled after the heat of the day, contract slightly, producing occasional soft clicks that sound like sighs. It is the language of the city itself, the sound of materials that have withstood centuries of expansion and contraction, of heat and cold, of rain and drought. Every stone has its own story. It was quarried from a specific quarry, carved by specific hands, set in place by masons whose aims have been lost, but whose work remains. In the potter's workshop, the potter's wheels stand motionless. Half-finished pots line the shelves, awaiting the moment to be fired in the kiln that dominates a corner of the workshop. The clay, extracted from a nearby deposit that has supplied the city's potters for centuries, has a characteristic reddish color that deepens when fired. The pots made here are simple but functional, designed not to impress with their beauty, but to serve, to hold water or oil or wine, to last for generations if treated with care. a fox ventures to the outskirts of the town, drawn by the scent of food scraps someone has left out. Its movements are cautious, its senses alert to any danger. Though the town sleeps, the fox does not trust humans. It has learned through bitter experience that humans can be unpredictable, sometimes generous, sometimes hostile. It finds what it is looking for, some bones with a little meat still clinging to them, and quickly retreats to the safety of the surrounding fields. The church bells strike midnight with 12 slow, deep chimes. It is the exact moment when one day ends and another begins. Though for the city's sleeping inhabitants, this has no immediate significance. Their dreams continue uninterrupted, weaving strange and illogical narratives that only make sense in the peculiar grammar of the dream world. In those dreams, they walk through altered versions of the very streets they walk during the day. Why? They encounter people who died long ago. They experience impossibilities that they accept without question. The night air carries sounds that would be inaudible during the day, swallowed up by the noise of human activity. The crackle of a dry branch 100 meters away, the rustling of a poplar's leaves trembling even when there is no perceptible wind, the distant howl of a wolf in the mountains, so far away that it might be imagined rather than heard. All these sounds form a nocturnal symphony which, though subtle, is present for those who know how to listen. In the town library, a small room at the back of the town hall, the books lie dormant on their shelves. They are leather-bound volumes, some with pages so fragile they threaten to disintegrate at the slightest touch. They contain records of births and deaths, of weddings and divorces, of commercial transactions and legal disputes. They are the city's written memory, a complement to the oral history passed down in conversations by the fireside. The librarian, a meticulous man of indeterminate age, has dedicated his life to preserving these documents, cataloguing them and protecting them from the inexorable passage of time. The moon begins its gradual descent towards the western horizon, though it will be hours yet before it disappears completely. Its light now comes from a different angle, creating new shadows, revealing aspects of the city that were previously hidden. A narrow staircase rising between two buildings, a tiny balcony adorned with pots of wilted geraniums, a relief carved into a wall, so eroded that it is almost impossible to discern what it originally depicted. At the cobbler's shop, the freshly repaired shoes await collection by their owners. Each pair tells a story, the soles worn differently depending on the gait of the wearer, the holes in specific places revealing peculiarities of the foot that inhabited them. The cobbler knows each of his customers by their shoes. He can identify who is who simply by the pattern of wear. It is an intimate knowledge, almost intrusive, but it is also a form of care, a form of service that goes beyond the simple commercial transaction. A different owl, or perhaps the same one as before, having changed position, hoots from the church bell tower. Its call is answered by another owl in the distance, and for a brief moment there is a dialogue between the two, a conversation in a language that humans cannot understand, but which is perfectly clear to those who speak it. Then silence returns, deeper than before, as if the exchange had exhausted all the energy available for making noise. The ivy climbing the walls of some buildings sways gently in the night breeze. These plants have been growing for decades, in some cases for over a century, their roots sunk into the cracks between the stones, their leaves forming green curtains that in summer provide welcome coolness inside the houses. The residents tolerate them and even appreciate them, although they occasionally need pruning when they threaten to completely cover the windows. In the communal stable, the horses sleep standing up, their heads bowed, their eyes closed. It is a light sleep from which they can emerge in an instant if they sense any danger. The cows, heavier and slower, lie on the straw, occasionally ruminating even in their sleep. The smell of animals, of dry straw, of manure, is strong but not unpleasant to those accustomed to it. It is the smell of rural life, of an existence intimately connected with the animals that provide milk and meat and labor. The stone city continues in its strange state of semi-sleep, never fully awake, but never fully asleep. It is as if it existed in limbo, a space between two worlds, partaking of both, but belonging entirely to neither. The inhabitants, in their beds, breathe in unison without realizing it, their chests rising and falling in a shared rhythm that is the heartbeat of the city itself. Their dreams intertwine in the darkness, forming a collective tapestry of hopes and fears, of memories and anticipations. The statues in the church square, figures of saints and martyrs carved in stone centuries ago, remain motionless on their pedestals. Erosion has softened their features, erasing details that were once sharp, giving them an almost abstract quality. Yet they still convey something, a presence that the locals feel as they pass by is less than Hashed number is greater than a reminder that this city has roots that run deep into the past, that it is part of a history far greater than any individual life. A different cat, this one with orange fur, walks along the edge of a roof with the confidence of an experienced tightrope walker. Its paws find support in places where it seems impossible there could be enough space. He stops, sits down, and looks out over the city spread out beneath him. From this elevated vantage point, the city looks like a labyrinth of shadows and dim lights, a three-dimensional puzzle whose solution only those who have lived here for years can understand. In the orchard behind the vicarage, the fruit trees stretch their bare branches towards the sky. It is winter, or nearly so, and the leaves fell weeks ago. But beneath the ground, the roots continue their invisible work, absorbing nutrients, preparing for the coming spring when leaves and flowers will sprout once more. It is a cycle that has repeated itself so many times it seems eternal, though every tree has a limited lifespan and will eventually be replaced by another. The river, in its constant flow, carries with it dry leaves that have fallen from the riverside trees, small twigs, occasionally some object lost by humans. Everything travels downstream towards unknown destinations, carried by a current that has followed the same path for millennia, gradually carving the rocky bed, deepening the channel millimeter by millimeter. Year after year is less than, #2 number is greater than. The sound of the water on the stones is like an ancient song that never ends, that has no beginning and no end. That simply is. In the sewers beneath the streets, rats move with confidence in the absolute darkness. They have built their own roots, their own cities within the city, complex networks of tunnels and chambers where they raise their young and store stolen food. The inhabitants above consider them vermin, but the rats have their own right to exist, their own struggle for survival, which is just as valid as that of any other living creature. The temperature continues to drop gradually. Inside their homes, people huddle deeper under their blankets, seeking warmth. Some wake briefly, just long enough to adjust their position or add another layer of cover before drifting back to sleep. These micro-awakenings are so brief that they leave no memory. They are merely ripples on the surface of deep sleep. In the clock tower, the mechanism continues its tireless work, gears turning, pendulums swinging, keeping time with a precision that would be the envy of many a more modern city. This clock was installed in the year 1782, a gift from a wealthy benefactor whose descendants still live in the town. It needs to be wound up every week, a task that has been assigned to the same family for generations. It is a job of great responsibility because the whole town relies on this clock to regulate its activities. Clouds are begin to form on the eastern horizon, barely visible against the starry sky. They are coming in from the sea, bringing with them the promise of rain, though it will not arrive until tomorrow or perhaps the day after. The most experienced farmers could predict this simply by the smell of the air, by the way the dampness feels against the skin, by subtle signs they have learnt to read through decades of careful observation. In the smithy, the anvil waits patiently for the return of the hammer that will give it purpose. The tools the blacksmith has forged during his lifetime, plows and hoes, plowshares and horseshoes, are scattered throughout the city, serving their owners, wearing down slowly with use, but lasting for years, sometimes generations. Every piece that leaves this smithy bears the blacksmith's mark, a small symbol carved into the hot metal, a signature that proudly declares who made it. A bat larger than the previous ones, perhaps a flying fox or some similar species, glides over the city with outstretched wings that seem to capture and hold the moonlight. Its flight is more majestic than erratic, more akin to the glide of a bird than the characteristic fluttering of smaller bats. It hunts large moths drawn to the few lights still shining, using a system of echolocation so refined that it can detect an insect the size of a fingernail 50 meters away. The night reaches its darkest point, that moment just before the very slow process of lightening begins, which will eventually lead to dawn. It is the moment of greatest stillness, when even nocturnal animals seem to pause in their activities. The silence is almost absolute, broken only by the subtlest sounds, the creaking of old wood, the distant dripping of a fountain, the whisper of the wind among the stones. At this moment of utmost darkness and stillness, the stone city seems to exist outside of normal time, suspended in a space where the past, the present, and the future merge into a single entity. The generations who have lived here, who were born, grew up, loved, worked and died within these stone walls, all seem to be present simultaneously, their spirits interwoven with the stones themselves, their stories permeating every corner, every surface. A dog barks briefly in the distance, then falls silent. Perhaps it saw a shadow that frightened it, or perhaps it was simply communicating with other dogs in a language humans cannot understand. The bark fades quickly, swallowed up by the surrounding silence, leaving barely an echo that lasts less than a second before disappearing completely. The stars, now at their brightest due to the complete darkness, seem closer than they really are, as if one could reach out and touch them. The Milky Way stretches like a river of pale light across the sky. Millions of individual stars so distant that their light has traveled for years, in some cases centuries, to reach us. The city's inhabitants is less than Hashed, number is greater than even in their sleep, are connected to these stars. They are part of the same universe, made of the same elements forged in the hearts of dead stars eons ago. In the bakery, the first embers begin to glow, preparing for the day ahead. The baker, who has barely slept 3 or 4 hours, gets up quietly so as not to wake his wife. He dresses in the dark, his hands finding his clothes by touch alone, and descends the creaking stairs to the workshop. He lights an oil lamp, and its golden light illuminates the sacks of flour, the wooden shovels, the baking trays. He begins his work as he has done every day for the last 30 years. His movements automatic, efficient, the result of decades of practice. The dough he prepared the night before has risen perfectly, swelling beneath the damp cloth covering it. He lifts the cloth, and the scent of active yeast fills the workshop. It is a comforting aroma, promising, evoking warm, crusty bread, sustenance, and tradition. He begins to knead, his strong hands pressing and folding the dough in a steady rhythm that is almost meditative. He does not think about what he is doing. His hands know the way all by themselves. Whilst the baker works, the city continues to sleep. But there is a sense of anticipation in the air, an unconscious realization that the night is drawing to a close, that the slow transition to a new day will soon begin. The birds, though they do not yet sing, begin to stir, are in their nests, getting ready. The cats that have spent the night hunting start to make their way to their daytime resting places. The world prepares to turn once more, to take another turn in its eternal cycle of day and night, light and darkness, activity and rest. In the houses, some of the lightest sleepers begin to stir restlessly, their dreams growing more vivid and strange as the moment of waking approaches. They murmur in their sleep, incoherent words that have no meaning outside the context of their private dream narratives. Some smile, lost in pleasant dreams. Others frown, trapped in nightmares they will forget seconds after waking. The moon is now sinking in the western sky and has taken on a slightly yellowish tinge. The first hints of dawn, though still invisible to the human eye, are already beginning to lighten the eastern edge of the sky. It is such a gradual change that it is impossible to pinpoint the exact moment it begins, but it is real and constant. The night is yielding its dominion, slowly but inexorably, to the approaching light. The baker places the first shaped loaves on trays and slides them into the oven, whose interior glows with the heat of the embers stoked throughout the night. The heat emanating from the oven is intense, and the baker wipes the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The smell of bread beginning to bake will soon fill not only the bakery but also the surrounding streets. It will be one of the first signs for the inhabitants that a new day has arrived. The stone city, in its perpetual half-sleep, prepares unhurriedly to awaken once more, to begin another day that will be very much like the thousands of days that have gone before and the thousands that will follow. There is comfort in this repetition, in the predictability of the cycles, in knowing that no matter what the night brings, there will always be a dawn. There will always be freshly baked bread. There will always be the familiar sound of bells marking the hours. The stars begin to fade, not truly disappearing, but being overtaken by the growing light of the approaching day. The Milky Way becomes less visible. The constellations lose their definition. It is a process that has occurred every morning since the world began, and will continue to occur long after the last stone of the city has turned to dust once more. The City of Stone That Never Quite Awoke. Chapter 2. The Lights That Never Hasted the Day. The city awakens without ever fully waking. It has always been so. So it will be this morning, as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow. The ancient stones know this rhythm. They carry it engraved in their porous texture, in the cracks that time has traced with a goldsmith's patience. Dawn does not arrive here as it does elsewhere. It does not burst forth. It does not announce its presence with trumpets of golden light. Here, the light filters through, seeps in, creeps in through slats of the wooden shutters, darkened by centuries of sun and rain. The wrought iron street lamps are still lit as the sky begins to take on a pale blue, almost grey, hue, that indefinable color that is neither night nor day. These are street lamps dating from the early 19th century, when the city decided it needed artificial light to guide its inhabitants through narrow alleyways where the sun barely penetrated, not even at midday. But these lights are in no hurry. They do not go out abruptly when dawn breaks. They remain, flickering, as if in doubt, as if they were not entirely sure that day will actually arrive. A lamplighter lit them last night, as he does every night. It is one of the last trades the city refuses to abandon, an anachronism that some consider quaint and others simply necessary. The lamplighter is a man of indeterminate age. He could be 50 or he could be 70. His weathered face reveals no secrets. He walks with a long pole topped with a hook, a tool his grandfather used before him, and his grandfather's grandfather before that. The pole is made of cherry wood, polished by the constant touch of generations of hands. Early this morning, whilst the cathedral bells have not yet struck the first toll, the lamplighter walks the streets in the opposite direction. But he does not extinguish the street lamps. Not yet. He stops beneath each one, observes the flame protected by the leaded glass, checks that it is still burning wit, that particular consistency, that gentle flicker that seems to breathe in time with the city itself. Some people who rose early in 1928 swore they had seen the lamplighter of that time talking to the lights, whispering words to them that they could not hear. No one thought it strange. In this city, things have their own language. The light emitted by these street lamps is amber in hue, warm, thick as old honey. It is not the cold, white light of modern cities, that light which screams and demands attention. This light suggests, proposes, invites you to look but does not compel. It spills over the uneven cobblestones of the streets, creating pools of golden clarity amongst which long shadows stretch, dense, like dark rivers flowing between islands of light. A cat crosses one of these islands. Its orange fur becomes almost luminescent beneath the street lamp. Its eyes reflect the inner fire of the flame. The animal is in no hurry. Nothing here is in a hurry. In the main square, 7 street lamps form an imperfect circle around the central fountain. The fountain has been dry since the summer of 1946, when a prolonged drought forced the water supply to be cut off for anything other than what was strictly necessary for survival. It was never turned on again. The stone basin remains empty, but the sculptures that adorn it, marble nymphs with outstretched hands in gestures of offering, continue to gaze towards the center as if awaiting the return of water that will never come. The 7 street lamps cast the shadows of these figures onto the square's ground, multiplying them, creating a motionless dance of shapes that seem to move when one glances at them out of the corner of one's eye. A baker opens the door to his shop. The smell of freshly baked bread mingles with the cold early morning air. He has been working since 3 o'clock in the morning, kneading the same recipe his family has used since 1872. The heat from the wood-fired oven spills out onto the street as he opens the rusty metal doors. The light from the street lamps now competes with the reddish glow emanating from inside the bakery. They are two different kinds of light, one ancient and contemplative, the other active and industrious, but they do not clash. They coexist. They respect each other. They intertwine. The baker pauses on the threshold, wiping his hands on his flour-covered off-white apron. He looks up towards the sky, which is gradually brightening, but this brightening is so gradual, so subtle, that if one didn't pay attention for several minutes, one wouldn't notice the change. It is like watching a child's hair grow, imperceptible in the moment, but undeniable over the course of days. The street lamps are still lit. It is not yet time for them to go out. The baker knows this. He feels it somewhere deep within his inherited knowledge. He returns inside his shop, where the golden loaves await in perfect rows. On Silversmith Street, the street lamps have blue-tinted glass, an aesthetic whim installed in 1903 when the Metalworkers Guild decided that their street deserved special lighting, different from the rest of the city. The light filtering through these tinted panes transforms the street into an underwater tunnel, a space where time seems to flow even more slowly than in the rest of the city, if such a thing is possible. The shop windows of the silversmiths' workshops reflect this blue light, multiplying it, reflecting it back 1,000-fold in each of the silver pieces on display, candelabra, trays, ceremonial goblets, all capturing and reflecting that bluish glow that makes the whole street seem to be underwater. An elderly woman walks down this street wearing a woolen shawl over her shoulders. Her footsteps echo against the stone walls with a muffled, subdued sound. She stops in front of one of the shop windows, not to look at the goods, but to observe her own reflection bathed in blue light. For a moment, in that strange mirror created by the shop window glass, the light from the street lamp and the silver behind the glass, she seems much younger. Or perhaps it is simply that the blue light erases the wrinkles, softens the angles, restores something that time has taken away. He smiles slightly, a private gesture that no one else will see, and continues on his way. The clock on the cathedral tower strikes 5:43 in the morning. It does not do so with chimes. Those will come later. At 6 o'clock, when the city officially considers the day to have begun. For now, only the inner mechanism goes about its silent work, moving the hands with a goldsmith's precision. This clock was installed in 1791, brought from a clockmaker's workshop in Switzerland by a master craftsman who took 3 months to adjust it correctly to what he called the city's particular rhythm. He said that time here did not flow as it did elsewhere, that the gears had to be calibrated differently. Some thought he was mad. Others simply nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. The street lamps near the cathedral are the oldest in the city. They were the first to be installed in 1813 as part of a modernization project that was never fully completed. The wrought iron on these lampposts features more elaborate designs than later ones. Intertwined plant forms, acanthus leaves, bunches of grapes, birds with outstretched wings. The light they emit seems dimmer than that of other street lamps, but not because the flames are weaker, but because the ironwork is denser, more intricately crafted, and casts shadows within the lamp itself, shadows that dance with every flicker of the flame. A sexton emerges from a side door of the cathedral. He carries a heather broom in one hand and an oil lamp in the other, though the lamp seems unnecessary with the street lamp still lit. But it is part of the ritual, part of the proper way of doing things. He begins to sweep the stone steps leading to the main entrance, moving the broom in rhythmic, almost hypnotic movements. Dust and dry leaves pile up in small heaps, which he will later gather up with his hands. There is no hurry. The parishioners won't arrive for hours, for the 7 o'clock Mass, and even then there will be few. The regulars, those who never miss it, those whom the town recognizes as part of its fabric just as much as it recognizes the stones of its walls. The sky above the city is now a pale lavender hue, a color that heralds the day but without insistence. The brightest stars are still visible, points of cold light far above the street lamps. Venus shines with particular intensity on the eastern horizon, where the sun will eventually appear, but there is no urgency in its ascent. The planet of dawn seems to float in that undefined space between the night that is fading and the day that has not quite arrived. At the market, the vendors begin to set up their stalls. They do so in silence, or almost in silence. Only the sound of wood against stone, of cloth unfurling, of boxes being moved. The market street lamps are more functional than decorative. Simple iron posts with cubic lamps, but their light is just as persistent. A cheese seller arranges his wares in neat rows, large wheels of mature cheese wrapped in cloth, wedges of fresh cheese on vine leaves. The amber light from the street lamp makes the cheeses look almost golden, edible treasures laid out as an offering. A flower seller arrives with baskets full of roses, carnations, lilies. The colors of the flowers under the streetlights are different from those they will display in the sunlight. The reds seem deeper. The whites take on a creamy hue. The yellows turn to antique gold. She knows this and arranges her flowers so they catch the lamplight best. When the sun is fully up, she will rearrange her stall, but for now she works with the light she has, the light the city offers her in these hours of transition. A boy runs across the square. His bare feet make barely a sound on the cobblestones. He carries a rolled-up newspaper under his arm, the morning edition that has just been printed at the old press on Calle del Arco. He is on his way to deliver it to one of the cafes that opens early, where the early risers will gather to drink thick hot chocolate and discuss the news as if the outside world really mattered as much as this world of stone and dim light. The boy knows every street lamp on his route. He knows which ones cast the longest shadows, and under which the light is brightest. They are his landmarks at this hour when darkness and light are still vying for territory. The cathedral bells ring. It is not the full peal, just two deep, resonant chimes that reverberate off the stone facades and multiply into echoes that take several seconds to fade away. It is the 5:45 signal. 15 minutes more until the city officially considers the day to have begun. 15 minutes more during which the street lamps will remain lit, fulfilling their role as guardians of the transition. At a window on the 3rd floor of a building on Calle Mer, a woman draws back the curtains and looks out. She has been awake all night, not because of insomnia, but because there are nights when she simply prefers not to sleep. Nights when being awake seems more interesting to her than any dream. She looks at the street lamps and counts in her head how many she can see from her window. 7. Always 7 from this angle. She has counted them hundreds of times over the years. 3 on the left, 4 on the right, forming an asymmetrical pattern that nevertheless seems perfectly balanced to her. The light from these street lamps reflects off the panes of other windows, creating a network of reflections that connects one building to another, one street to the next, weaving the city into a tapestry of light and shadow. A horse pulls a car down a side street. The animal moves slowly, its hooves producing a rhythmic, metallic sound that keeps time like a living metronome. The cart driver dozes on the box seat, the reins slack in his hands. The horse knows the route. It has traveled it 1,000 times. It knows where to turn, where to stop. The street lamps mark the way like lighthouses on a rocky coast. The animal greets them with a nod of the head as it passes beneath each one, a gesture so subtle it is barely noticeable. But it is there, a recognition between creatures inhabiting the same liminal space between night and day. In the municipal library, a light remains lit in a second-floor window. It is not a street lamp, but an oil lamp, held by a librarian who has not gone home all night. He is cataloguing a batch of antique books recently acquired from a private collection, working with the meticulousness required when handling texts 4 centuries old. The paper crinkles beneath his fingers with the sound of dry leaves. The ink of the handwritten titles on the covers has faded to a dull brown. From his window he can see 3 street lamps, their light faintly competing with that of his lamp. He prefers to work at this hour, when the city is like this, suspended, when the silence is so complete that he can hear the rustle of his own breath against the pages. The baker steps out of his shop once more. This time he is carrying a tray of freshly baked rolls, still steaming. He places them in the shop window, where they will join the bread he put out earlier. The steam rising from the rolls curls upwards in lazy spirals, visible in the cold early morning air. A nearby street lamp illuminates this steam, turning it into a spectacle of shifting shapes, dragons of smoke and mist that form and dissolve in seconds. The baker watches this for a moment, a brief pause in his routine, a moment of contemplation before returning to work. In the old quarter, where the houses lean against one another like weary old men, the street lamps are fewer and farther between. Here the NIT retreats more slowly, clinging to the narrow alleys, to the covered passageways, to the inner courtyards where the sun barely enters, not even in summer. A solitary street lamp marks the entrance to a passageway that runs through an entire block of houses, a stone tunnel where footsteps echo strangely, as if one were walking inside a musical instrument. The light from this street lamp reaches only the first few meters of the passage. The rest remains in semi-darkness, a semi-darkness that could be night or could simply be the absence of light that characterizes these forgotten spaces. A black cat walks along the edge of the roof of a 3-story house. Its silhouette is outlined against the sky that is gradually brightening, but from the street it seems to float in nothingness, a patch of darkness denser than the surrounding air. It stops beside a chimney from which a thin wisp of smoke is rising. Someone has already lit their morning fire. The cat sits down, wraps its tail around its front paws, and watches the city from its tiled vantage point. It sees the street lamps still lit, scattered points of amber light across the streets like fallen stars that refuse to go out. The bells ring out again. 5 chimes this time, faster than before, almost cheerful in their insistence. 5:30. Day is breaking, but the street lamp still won't go out. The lamplighter has finished his inspection round and is now sitting on a stone bench in San Sebastian Square, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. The smoke rises in a straight line into the still air of the early morning. He watches the sky, looking for signs. It is not the clock that tells him when to switch off the streetlights, but something more subtle, something to do with the quality of the light, with the way the shadows shift, with a sensation in the air itself. A nun crosses the square walking quickly, her black habit fluttering slightly with her movement. She carries a rosary in her hands, the beads passing through her fingers with a steady rhythm. She is on her way to the cloistered convent on Calle de las Animas, where the sisters will already be singing the Office of Lauds, those dawn prayers that rise to the sky like birds of words. The light from the street lamps briefly illuminates her face as she passes beneath them. A serene face, focused on the silent prayer she recites as she walks. At the Sleeping Eagle Inn, the guests are still asleep. It is a small inn, just 6 rooms, run by a family since 1849. The wooden beams of the ceiling creak occasionally, the building's voice talking to itself. In the kitchen, the landlady prepares the breakfast she will serve when the guests come down, probably not before 8. She cuts bread, arranges jams in hand-painted ceramic bowls, heats milk in a copper saucepan over the fire. Through the kitchen window she can see 2 street lamps, their light now mingling with the growing glow of the approaching day is less than #2. Number is greater than a delivery van pulls up outside a grocery shop. The driver gets out with heavy boxes of supplies and stacks them in front of the closed door. He knows the shopkeeper won't open until 8:30, but prefers to make his deliveries early, before the streets get busy. He works by the light of a nearby street lamp, counting the boxes, checking that everything is in order. His breath forms small clouds of vapor in the cold air. The horse pulling the cart patiently chews the feed from a sack hanging around its neck. The sound of its jaws crushing the grain is surprisingly loud in the silence of the street. In the clock tower, the mechanism prepares to strike 6. The gears turn, the pulleys tighten, the hammers rise towards the bells. It is a mechanical ballet of absolute precision, every part moving exactly when it should, exactly as it should. The master clockmaker who maintains this mechanism says it has a personality of its own, that some days the bells ring more cheerfully and others more melancholically, depending on factors he cannot quite fathom. Humidity, perhaps, or drafts, or simply the mood of the weather itself. The bells ring, 6 deep chimes, solemn, that spread over the city like a declaration. It is officially daylight, but the street lamps are still lit. Still, the lamplighter stubs out his cigarette on the sole of his shoe, puts the butt in a pocket of his waistcoat, stands up, but does not yet move towards tea, the nearest street lamp. He waits. He watches. The sky is clearly brighter now, a pale blue with hints of pink on the eastern horizon. The stars have vanished except for Venus, which insists on its presence. A flock of sparrows takes flight from a rooftop, hundreds of tiny bodies moving in unison, tracing shifting shapes in the air. They pass over the street lamps, their shadows cast against the walls of the houses, multiplying their apparent number. The sound of their wings is like that of 1,000 cards being shuffled at once. They circle over the main square, descend towards the dry fountain, alight on the rim of the stone basin, searching for crumbs or seeds that some compassionate passerby might have left behind. A man opens a fabric shop. The scent of new fabric, that smell of fiber and dye and starch, spills out onto the street. He hangs rolls of fabric on hooks outside the shop. Dark velvets, shiny silks, white linens. Under the streetlights, the colors are different from those they will display in a few hours. The burgundy velvet looks almost black. The blue silk takes on violet hues. The white linen glows with a ghostly radiance. He is familiar with this transformation. He has witnessed it every morning for 32 years. He knows that customers arriving in the early hours will choose colors based on this light. And later, when the sun is high, some will be surprised to find that the fabric they bought is not quite the color they remembered. The milkman makes his rounds. His cart is full of jugs of fresh milk, still warm from the milking that took place before dawn on farms on the outskirts of the city. He stops at every house where an empty jug has been left on the doorstep, picks it up, and replaces it with a full one. The clinking of the earthenware jugs against the metal of the cart is a morning melody the town knows well. Some people say they can sleep through any noise except that of the milkman, that this particular sound has some quality that penetrates dreams. In a 2-story house with a wrought iron balcony, a young woman leans out, a cup of tea in her hands. The steam from the tea rises in slow spirals. Her hair is loose, still tousled from sleep, and she wears a woolen dressing gown over her nightdress. She looks out onto the street, where the street lamps are still lit, even though the sky is now clearly daylight. It doesn't strike her as strange. Nothing in this city strikes her as strange because she has lived here all her life. And this is the way things are, the way they have always been. She drinks her tea in small sips, enjoying the contrast between the hot liquid and the cold morning air. The lamplighter finally moves. He walks towards the nearest lamppost with his long pole. But when he reaches it, he makes no move to open the glass to extinguish the flame. Instead, he places his hand on the iron post, as if taking the street lamp's pulse. He closes his eyes. He waits. A light breeze sweeps down the street, stirring the fallen leaves into small whirlwinds. The street lamp's flame flickers but does not go out. The lamplighter opens his eyes, nods to himself, and continues on to the next street lamp. It is not yet time. At the school in the neighborhood to the east, a teacher arrives early to prepare her classroom. She enters the empty building, her footsteps echoing in the tiled corridors. She opens the windows in her classroom to air it out, letting in the cold morning air. From here, she can see 4 street lamps on the adjacent street, all lit up. As she arranges the books on her desk, as she writes the date on the blackboard with white chalk, as she lays out paper and pencils for her pupils, the street lamps stand like luminous sentinels, refusing to retreat before the day that is already here. A watchmaker opens his workshop. It is a small space, the walls covered with clocks of all kinds. Wall clocks, table clocks, pocket watches. The ticking of all these clocks running simultaneously creates a surround sound, a symphony of time marking itself. Some clocks are running fast, others slow, each marking its own version of the time. The watchmaker says they are all right, that they simply measure different aspects of time, different currents in the river of time flowing through the city. He turns on a lamp at his workbench, even though the light from the street lamp outside still streams in through the window. He needs both lights for the delicate work he is doing, handling tiny gears, adjusting springs finer than hairs. The bells ring out again. This time they do not mark the hour but call the faithful to Mass. It is the prima, the first prayer of the day in the traditional liturgy. Only a few will answer this call. The most devout, those who believe the day cannot begin properly without this act of faith. From different parts of the city, solitary figures walk towards the cathedral, their footsteps echoing in streets still largely empty. They move beneath the lit street lamps, shadows walking amidst circles of light is less than number. 2 is greater than. A cobbler pulls a bench out onto the street in front of his workshop. He sits down with a shoe in his hands and begins to work, hammering tiny nails into the sole. The metallic sound of the hammer against the nails is rhythmic, almost musical. He works under the combined light of a street lamp and the sun, which is now peeking timidly over the rooftops to the east. The dual light creates 2 shadows of the hammer, one darker than the other, which move almost but not quite at the same time, creating a strange effect of duplication. At the post office, an employee sorts the letters that arrived during the night on the last post coach. He sorts them by street, by neighborhood, preparing them for the delivery round which will begin in an hour. Some of these letters come from far away. They have traveled for weeks, crossing borders and seas, until they reach this stone city where time seems to move at a different pace. The clerk sometimes wonders if the letters sense the change when they enter the city, if somehow they perceive that they have arrived in a place where the urgencies of the outside world lose their weight. A newspaper vendor sets up her stall on a busy corner. She stacks the morning editions in neat piles, protected from the dew by a waterproof tarpaulin. The headlines speak of events in the capital, of international politics, of distant conflicts. But she knows that the inhabitants of this city will read these news stories with a certain detachment, as if they were works of fiction, events taking place in some parallel realm that is only tangentially connected to the real world of stone and dim light in which they live. The lamplighter continues his rounds. He has now visited 15 lampposts without extinguishing any of them. At each one he repeats the same ritual. He places his hand on the post, closes his eyes, waits, continues. Some people who see him doing this think he is mad, but most simply accept that he knows something they do not, that there is a knowledge in his trade that transcends the mere mechanics of switching lights on and off. The sun finally appears fully above the horizon. It is not a dramatic sunrise. There are no rays of light piercing through clouds in epic formations. There is no explosion of colors. It is a discreet dawn, almost shy, as if the sun itself did not want to burst too abruptly into this city that clearly prefers gentle transitions. The sunlight is pale, whitish, so different from the amber light of the street lamps that it seems to come from a completely different universe. And yet, the street lamps remain lit. Their light is now less visible, competing with the sunlight, and in that competition it seems weaker, but it is still there. The flames continue to burn behind the leaded glass, continuing their subtle dance, their fiery breath. The lamplighter arrives at the main square, where the 7 street lamps form their imperfect circle around the dry fountain. His tops in the center of the square turns slowly on his heel, observing each of the street lamps in turn. A small child emerges from a house, led by the hand by his mother. It is perhaps his first time awake at this hour. His eyes are filled with wonder at this version of the city he does not know. He points to the lit street lamps and asks his mother why they are on if it is already daylight. She explains that in this city the lights are in no hurry, that they wait until they are completely sure the day is well and truly here before turning off. The boy accepts this explanation without question, just as he will later accept that the water in the fountain flows upwards on Tuesdays, or that cats can talk if you listen closely enough. In this city, these things make sense. In the cafe on Calle del Sol, the first customers sit down at the marble tables. A waiter places heavy porcelain cups in front of them and serves dark, thick coffee, which fills the air with its bitter, comforting aroma. The customers speak in hushed tones, as if raising one's voice were a transgression at this hour, still so close to nightfall. Through the cafe window, 3 street lamps can be seen, all 3 still lit. No one in the cafe comments on this. It is normal. It is as it should be. A street sweeper pushes his cart through the streets, collecting the rubbish the night left behind. Dry leaves, crumpled papers, fruit peel. Everything goes into the wooden cart with iron wheels that sway, acts as it moves over the cobblestones. He works methodically, street by street, following a route he knows by heart. The street lamps mark his progress, each one a milestone on his morning rounds. In a high-up window, an artist is already painting. He has set up his easel by the window to make the most of the growing daylight. But on his canvas, he is painting precisely this moment of the street lamps lit beneath the morning sun, this impossible superimposition of 2 kinds of light that elsewhere would be mutually exclusive, but here coexist without conflict. He mixes golden yellows for the lamplight, pale blues for the sunlight, and at the point where they meet, he creates a green so subtle it barely exists. A color of the boundary, a color of transition. The lamplighter finally raises his pole towards the first street lamp. The sunlight is now strong enough to cast sharp shadows. Shadows that the sun casts with more conviction than an hour ago. He opens the small glass pane of the street lamp with the hook on his pole, reaches inside, turns a valve. The flame goes out with a barely audible sigh. It is the first street lamp to be extinguished this morning. There are 184 more to go. A woman waters the plants on her balcony. The water falls in silvery arcs from her metal watering can, splashing the leaves of red geraniums and green ferns. A few drops fall onto the street below, where they evaporate almost instantly upon touching the sea. Old stone. As she waters, she watches the lamplighter at work, switching off the lights one by one, and thinks there is something beautiful about that work, something to do with closing circles, with completing cycles. At the bakery, the smell of bread has already drawn in the first customers. They come in, rubbing their hands together against the cold, their breath forming clouds of steam. They point to the loaves they want. The baker wraps them in brown paper, ties the parcel with string. The conversations are brief, functional, but friendly. There is no rush in these transactions. The customer may take 5 minutes to decide between rye and wheat bread, and the baker will wait patiently, without showing any signs of impatience. The lamplighter extinguishes another street lamp, and another. He moves methodically now, following a pattern that only he fully understands. It is not simply the lamppost closest to the next one, but there is a logic to the order, a sequence that has to do with the age of the lampposts, with their location, with the way sunlight will reach each street depending on the angle of the buildings. A cockerel crows from a pen in a back garden. It's strange to hear a cockerel in the middle of the city, but this particular house has kept hens for generations. A special permit granted in 1893 that was never revoked. The rooster's crow is late. The bird should have crowed hours ago, at the first sign of dawn. But perhaps he too follows the particular rhythm of this city, where things happen when they must, according to an internal logic rather than the rules of the outside world. In the library, the librarian finally extinguishes his oil lamp. He has finished cataloguing the old books. He stretches. His bones creak. He has been in the same position for too many hours. He looks out of the window and sees that the street lamps are going out one by one. He smiles. It is the sign that he can go home, sleep for a few hours, return in the afternoon. The city tells him when the day has truly begun, and it is not when the sun rises, but when the street lamps go out. A dog trots down the street with no apparent destination. It is not a stray. It wears a well-kept leather collar, but it seems to enjoy these solitary morning expeditions. It stops to sniff every corner, every lamppost, every tree. Under a street lamp that has just been switched off, it lifts its leg in a territorial gesture. The iron post of the street lamp is still warm from the flame that was burning inside it just a moment ago. At school, the first children begin to arrive. They come in small groups, chatting amongst themselves with that particular energy of childhood that contrasts with the slow pace of the city. But even they, without realizing it, slow their pace as they enter the streets. They adapt to the tempo of the place. The teacher greets them at the door, smiles at them, wishes them good morning. Above their heads, she can see the lamplighter at work turning off the lights. Soon, she thinks, soon they will all be off and the day will have officially begun. Completely. The sun is now clearly high in the sky, although high is relative in this city where the buildings create deep canyons of shadow. Direct sunlight touches only the east-facing facades, leaving the rest of the streets in a twilight that the street lamps would have illuminated, but which now, as they are switched off, remains in darkness until the sun completes its arc. In a carpenter's workshop, the master and his apprentices begin their work. The sound of saws cutting wood, of hammers driving nails, of planes smoothing surfaces, joins the city's growing morning concert. Each trade adds its voice, its own particular rhythm, and together they create a symphony of work and life that defines the daylight hours. An elderly woman feeds pigeons in the square. She carries breadcrumbs in a cloth bag and scatters them generously. The pigeons flock to her, swirling at her feet in a sea of grey and white feathers. She knows them individually, or so she says. She claims she can tell each pigeon apart from the others by subtle markings in their plumage. She talks to them as she feeds them, telling them about her grandchildren who live in another city, about the pain in her knees, about the quality of the bread she bought this morning. The lamplighter has already turned off more than 100 street lamps. His work is roughly halfway done. He stops by a public fountain, turns on the tap, drinks water directly from his cupped hands. The water is cold, almost icy. It comes from springs in the mountains surrounding the city. He splashes his face, runs his wet hands through his gray hair. He takes a deep breath, looks around him. The city is now clearly awake, though not yet fully so. The shops are open. People are walking through the streets, but there is still a sense of transition in the air, as if the city were caught between two states of being. In a 3-story house with an inner courtyard, a family is having breakfast together. The father is reading the newspaper. The mother is serving hot chocolate to the children. The grandparents are chatting about the weather, about the news, about the little events that make up their days. Through the dining room window, you can see the garden, where a 100-year-old orange tree still bears a few golden fruits amongst its dark leaves. A garden lamp remains lit, its light now almost invisible in the sunlight, but still present, still fulfilling its role of maintaining continuity between the night that was and the day that is. The lamplighter arrives at Silversmith Street, where the blue glass street lamps create that underwater effect that so distinguishes this street. Here he works more slowly, with greater care. These street lamps are more delicate than the others, the mechanism more complex. He switches each one off with precise movements, almost ceremonial. The silversmiths, who are beginning to open their workshops, greet him with a wave of the hand. He returns the greeting with a nod of the head. In the market, the activity has reached a level of intensity that contrasts with the stillness of an hour ago. The vendors hawk their wares. The buyers haggle over prices. Coins and goods are exchanged in a commercial ballet that has been repeated every morning since time immemorial. The cheese seller has already sold 3 large wheels. The flower seller has rearranged her stall to make the most of the sunlight, as she knew she would have to do. The colors of the flowers are different now, perhaps more vivid, but some customers will say they preferred how they looked under the streetlights. A photographer sets up his camera on a tripod on a street corner. It is an old camera with a bellows that requires glass plates to capture the images. He is photographing the city at this specific hour, when the last streetlights are still on, but the day is already evident. It is a time that lasts only a few minutes, a unique moment that repeats itself every morning but is never exactly the same. The light is different every day. The shadows fall at slightly different angles. The clouds form ever-changing patterns. The lamplighter enters the main square. Only the 7 street lamps surrounding the dry fountain remain here. He stops once more in the center of the square, as he did before, and turns slowly observing each street lamp. From different points in the square, people watch him. It is a moment some look forward to every morning. This final moment when the last lights go out and the city finally admits that the day has come. He approaches the first of the 7 street lamps. He raises his staff, opens the glass, extinguishes the flame. The street lamp goes dark, becoming an inert object of iron and glass, temporarily stripped of its purpose. He walks towards the second. He repeats the process. One by one, the 7 street lamps go out. When he extinguishes the last one, a collective sigh seems to sweep across the square, though no one has actually sighed. It is merely the sensation that something has come to an end, that a cycle has been completed. The lamplighter lowers his pole and rests it against his shoulder like a soldier with his rifle. He looks around the square one last time. The marble nymphs in the dry fountain look different now. In the sunlight alone, their shadows are harsher, more defined. They lose some of the magic they had under the amber light of the street lamps, but gain a clarity they did not possess before. He begins to walk towards his home. His work is done for today. He will return this evening, when the shadows lengthen, when the sunlight begins to fade, and he will walk the streets in the opposite direction, switching on, one by the 185 street lamps he has now switched off. It is a never-ending task, an eternal cycle of light and darkness, of switching on and off, of day and night. But for now, at this midday hour, the city belongs to the sun. The shadows are sharp, the colors are true. Time seems to move a little faster, though never as much as in other cities. The stone of the buildings reveals its true color in direct light, a gray streaked with ochre and pink, polished by centuries of wind and rain. The roof tiles glisten when the sun touches them, reds, oranges, and browns in endless variations. In the cathedral, Mass has finished. The worshippers step out into the sun, squinting, accustomed to the dim light inside. They disperse towards their homes, towards their jobs, towards their daily lives. The bells ring, marking the half hour. It is 9:30. The city has fully awakened, though with the same deliberate slowness that characterizes everything that happens here. A breeze blows down from the mountains, carrying with it the scent of pine trees and the snow that crowns the highest peaks. The city breathes this air, incorporating it into its own aroma of ancient stone, wood smoke, and freshly baked bread. It is a unique blend, impossible to replicate, an olfactory signature as distinctive as a fingerprint. In a high-up window, the artist puts the finishing touches to his painting of the street lamps lit up in the morning Sioux Inn. He has captured something, he believes, something about the nature of this place, about its refusal to rush, about its insistence on keeping the artificial light on until it is completely sure that the natural light has come to stay. He signs the canvas in the bottom right-hand corner, in small, discreet handwriting. The paint will dry for days, the layers of oil blending and settling, transforming subtly as the color matures. The day goes on. The hours will pass, each at its own pace, none exactly the same as yesterday's or tomorrow's. The city's inhabitants will go about their routines, those daily dances they have perfected over years or decades. The baker will knead more bread for lunch. The cobbler will repair more shoes. The watchmaker will adjust more mechanisms. The librarian will catalogue more books when he returns from his break. And when the shadows begin to lengthen, when the sun begins its descent towards the western horizon, when the colors of the world begin to soften and fade, the lamplighter will leave his house once more. He will take his cherrywood staff, polished by generations of use, and begin his nightly rounds. He will light the street lamps one by one, restoring their amber glow to the streets, preparing the city for another night, for another dawn, for another sunrise that will arrive without haste. And tomorrow, it will all happen again. The street lamps will shine in the darkness before dawn. They will continue to burn as the sky brightens. They will refuse to go out when the sun appears on the horizon. For this is the city of stone that never fully awakens, the city where the lights never hasten the day, the city where time flows according to its own laws, indifferent to the urgencies of the outside world. And in this resistance to haste, in this insistence on honoring transitions, in this respect for the thresholds between states of being, the city finds its identity, its reason for existing, its particular way of inhabiting time.
Release the tension in your forehead. Relax the muscles around your eyes. Let your arms rest completely, heavy and warm at either side of your body. Your breath now flows naturally, like gentle waves lapping at the shore and receding effortlessly. The stories you have heard tonight slowly fade away, becoming distant whispers that you no longer need to follow. If this journey through time has served you well, you can support this space by liking, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments. That way, more people seeking rest may find refuge here. And if you are still awake, there is another story waiting in silence. ready to guide you deeper into sleep. But for now, let the voices of the past fade gently away. Let the names, dates, and events melt into the mist of the night's oblivion. The story can wait until tomorrow. Close your eyes. Let go of everything. Rest deeply, and may you have sweet dreams.